Hello and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host Bryan. I almost missed that part. We're going to wrap up today with a special selection. It's where one of you tell me exactly what it is I need to check out. Today's special selection comes at us from Miles, prog rock band from Australia, almost a bit like the Mars Volta with less dissonance. Well, that sounds pretty awesome to me. I really want to get into the Mars Volta. I've enjoyed a couple of their earlier tracks, but the dissonance and chaos tend to hinder my progression into their style. So, having a less progressive Mars Volta sounds awesome. We're gonna check out the track Pink Lemonade today. Let's dive in.
What have we got here?
Pink lemonade. Not too sweet, not too sour.
I think I'm brave enough to try some of that.
Heaven will burn away if you just keep on calling out its name. You seek a key you can't afford when
That
you
bass line on the right is very nice.
I got a cure, so don't you worry now. Baby, my recipe is gonna heal your woes. When the devil's knocking at your door, kneel and I'll pour. How can you go wrong? You're off this lemonade dawn. Well, how can you be strong when the devil's on the inside, devil's on the outside in?
Really interesting counting here.
You're falling, you're falling. Give me, I want a little taste. This spell is breaking me down. If I wanna get knocked, ooh, this body's breaking. This spell's been breaking me far too long. Oh, can you help me now? Oh, can you help me now? Oh, good Lord, yeah. You'll never know just how it tears me. Won't let me go, let me go. Please just let me go. I'll take the sweat from your palms. Jet fuel ghosts. TV dinners with kerosene modes. Well, everybody's racing for the higher place. To get down. So they can have Christmas magic again. Wipe the sweat slipping away. Rattle the cage. Here
Yeah.
come the from the time that I saw my young future, I dreamed they were coming.
Love the rhythmic flow of this track so far.
So can you help me, darling? Just help me. Soul like yours, just collecting extras. So sick, anything from them to bypass the door. And if you're drenched in fear on my pink lemon shores, you'll be knocking forevermore. So tell me now if you are, 'cause I'm pouring.
Dang, that harmony.
And I don't fuck around. Sour patches too close to the sun. If the mirror's green
Kind of psychedelic.
Fix your legs with murder. A phantom hatchery becomes a louder when I send to Trinity to fold. Break the sleep, the coffee down. There's a rain of splinters till the road. You drank this shit, now the real fun has only begun.
belting it out.
Even Peter didn't believe that he didn't have a son. It took a rooster to crow before them tears rolled. Then he truly saw into my cup, and he thought this could dissolve my mental fences.
Yeah. Moving into a little bit jazzy idea there.
Heaven will burn away if you just keep on calling out its name. You seek a key you cannot forge, and you're down oh so low. And you were down oh so low. When you were down, when you were down oh so low. Down so low. Down so low. Down so
Halftime in it? Yeah. Interesting lift right there.
How have we got here? I think I'm brave enough to try something.
Not too sweet, not too sour.
I think I'm brave enough to try something. How have we got here? I think
It's an interesting shift.
Come on, big boy. Up you get. Oh, you don't look so good. Come, let mommy make it all better. You got the sense.
The emergency vehicle sound is interesting.
Warmer.
Like a fire hydrant that's been knocked over too. That was neat. The door closed to the immediate shift. It is a wee bit different from where we were, huh?
My body's been looked over. The object of your lust, I got you all hot and bothered. Such a pretty little husk. Oh, wouldn't it be lovely holding me by your side? Won't question your taste, won't trouble your mind. I'm a yummy slice of heaven, boy. I'm just the way you like. Oh, baby, I'll be your tacky ornament. So slut, your tacky ornament.
Hmm. You know what's interesting is the first 6 minutes, I'm on board with this. I'm like, yeah, this is Mars Volta, but less chaos, right? Not to say Mars Volta isn't focused, but this feels more restrained, less experimental, I suppose would be the phrase I want. They still have some cacophonous sections. There was one moment about 2 minutes in where the left guitar was just sort of doing its own 16th notes. That felt very divorced from what the rest of the band was doing, very Mars Volta-esque. But they never really go into a long jammy section. And the jammy sections are really the big hurdle for me. I don't mind tasteful dissonance, I don't mind tasteful chaos, and I think Mars Volta typically sit on the tasteful side of it, but then they enter into like a 6 minute jam session and it just never really clicks with me, and this stays more focused on the surface level story rather than exploring the emotions of the events musically through experimental means. That's really where I think Mars Volta differentiates from a lot of these other proggier post-hardcore adjacent projects. And so, yeah, I was really on board with a lot of this. And then we get to the end there, and it's a totally different song, totally different key, totally different style, totally different vocalist. For all intents and purposes, we entered into a new song. That song also glitched out, feeling like it was moving into the song after that. And so the first thing that came to my mind is the Deer Hunter. And I'm curious if this is a concept album, narratively linking everything, not just conceptually. I don't know. But that's where my brain was going. I was like, yeah, definitely Mars Volta, a little on the lighter side. And right there at the end, I was like, well, kind of got some Deer Hunter vibes here. And so I kind of just want to end the video here and just erase the analysis word from the title and be like, you guys just get a reaction today, because I honestly just want to go listen to the album. I'm sold on this. Have we done Closure in Moscow before? No. What about during a live? The name is familiar. I can't believe I've never heard them. Does not look like we've had them on a live stream either. How do I know the name then? Regardless, thank you. Who is this? Miles. Yes. Thank you for this, because I gotta dig into this. I just want to end the video so quickly so that I can check them out. Everything about this is great. So right from the bat, right off the bat, right from the start, there's a lot of post-hardcore influence, I think particularly in the vocals, the guitar and drum and bass work. It's not so much, it's almost like post-hardcore, where it still has some influences of the sound, but it is most definitely not a post-hardcore sound. You can still hear a little bit in the vocal delivery, you can hear a lot of it in the harmonic textures, what chords and chord progressions are typically utilized, but it's been merged and mutated into something that is quasi music theater. There's a lot of sections in here that introduce a jazzier and more theatrical approach to both delivery of notes, especially heard in the vocal sections, which feel like somebody who has experience with music theater and has sung show tunes before, but also in some of the note interval, note choices, and chord progressions that introduce a bit more of a theatric and even in some cases jazzy element to it. It has a post-hardcore foundation, but it's not fully post-hardcore. I'd say it's really only 50% of it at this point. A lot of the feeling of post-hardcore is gone, but a sense of its presence is still felt in the composition. Especially in the more noisy sections. I think those still retain a lot of the post-hardcore DNA. But yeah, there should be a post-hardcore genre because there's plenty of bands who have evolved from that, and especially for some reason got into a theatric angle. Not sure why that's such a popular decision to do, but um, I mean, we still have the guitar work in here. We have the bass work. The drums are very rockish throughout most of this. The vocals are loud and forward placed for the most part, not constantly, but fairly consistently. And there's a very strong rock element underneath all of this. Um, but like I said, it's paired with some cool things. There is a moment at the end when I had talked about an interesting lift they had gone into. That was a very jazzy idea. The vocalist loves to do these little accidental passing tones everywhere. If you ever listen specifically to the vocals on this and you hear a note and you're just like, well, that's kind of strange. Maybe you don't have the words to put it into words how it's strange or why it's strange. It just was unexpected for that note to be there. That's the jazzy accidentals that this dude loves to use, and it feels purposeful when they appear because they almost always add a specific notion to that section, oftentimes introducing a bit of tension, which I think is going to line up with specific phrases being said, but also during some of the brighter sections of the track and more adventurous moments harmonically, he introduces these accidentals that increase the positive vibe of what's happening. It is really interesting to hear the vocalist command so much of the emotional resonance in here. The chord progression, of course, is responsible for a lot of the emotional weight, but here's a little trick. Chord progressions can be emotional, but they're usually really cemented in place by the melody line. Um, Chords are more of an outline of an emotion. The melody itself is going to give the severity of the emotion. And I think this vocalist really understands that. And being in the spotlight a majority of the time, as far as being a lead melody instrument, really exemplifies and showcases the specific kinds and flavors of emotions that they're going for, that the chord progression points towards, and he says, this is the specific emotion I'm going for. Um, and is really not just not afraid to, but feels actively encouraged and uh, quite sure of himself of what note specifically to utilize from outside of the key to pinpoint the specific emotion they want for that moment. And it is really impressive listening to his command and control over the emotional weight of pretty much every line that he's singing. I mean, I guess the end result is that the composition here, the emotional atmosphere that's crafted by the combination of chord and melody, is masterful. That's the end result of all of this, and it just sounds so good to listen to. It is infectious to be on this twisty, turny ride of emotions. While most of the track fits within a general vibe, he explores all these like sub emotions that I think is really cool. I don't always have the proper word for the specific emotion I'm feeling. It's positive or negative is more of how I can go about describing it. But there's complexity in the harmonic resonance throughout this, and just like I said, a joy to listen to. There wasn't a dull moment. Everything was spicy, chord wise. Um, and it's just something we don't get a lot of on this channel, and when I get it, I'm gonna latch on to it. Like I said, this album, I guess in particular, though, I also saw on Spotify when I was pulling this up, they have a single from this year. Yeah, it's just a single. They have two albums, it looks like, and then a couple of three singles. The artwork on them is kind of wild too. It's all very stark, uh, washed out red on black. Washed out red on gray. I mean, the whole thing's kind of washed out. It's kind of muted. Anyways, back onto the music. Yeah, just they know how to write. That's the big takeaway. They are composers, to understate it. Something else I noticed throughout here is that they're not afraid of layers, but it's always done in a tasteful way. The beginning is certainly a bit more cacophonous than the rest of the track. I was a little worried we were going to hear a lot of this noisiness. As I mentioned, the left guitar is kind of doing its own thing on the opening, I guess it's the second section we get into. Very Mars Volta-esque, but it doesn't really stick around like that for long. And eventually they line back up. And while there is a consistent, I don't want to say disjointedness, but individualistic writing between many of the main melodic sections, basically we have a lot of counterpoint in here, although they're not quite as interlinked. My favorite types of counterpoint are ones that augment the two lines, where maybe they play in between each other's rests, or rhythmically they dance around and create hockets against the melodic ideas. Maybe where they do different concepts, but the harmonies are always lining up in beautiful ways. Just ways that they support the two different melodies. They support each other and create a nice third melody in the middle that's a combination of the two of them. This is just a layer on top of everything. They write a lot of ways that are cacophonous, where the two or three sometimes lines don't necessarily elevate each other, they all just simply exist in the same space simultaneously. It can be a bit much, but I think the chaos, at least in this case, feels purposeful. And I don't know if that's because I've already read too much into their composition and everything feels so intentful that I immediately put purpose into this, even though I don't quite know what it means yet. But for sure, it was a little bit of a hurdle. It is a bit crazy for my ears, but I don't know, it worked, and it was that single isolated event. We do have tons of layers throughout this track, but I think this was the only place where things felt uncontrolled. And since it was used as a spice in this one moment rather than the de facto status of the dual guitar lines, it feels like it has meaning. And I can't wait to get to the lyrics and see if they go in any direction that would make sense for that. But the whole thing well, actually, here's the thing too, is it feels very whirlwindy, right? Like a maelstrom. And it wasn't long after this we went to that psychedelic section. And I don't know if they're specifically supposed to be read that way, but it does feel like getting dizzy and then not being able to focus on anything. You know, you start seeing double. You wave your hand and you got a trail behind it. But this one isn't, induced by drugs. You've just spun around in a circle for too long and your eyes can't focus. The world itself is still moving, and it creates a disorienting element that the psychedelic concept leans into. I mean, even on that front, the idea of transitions, I think a lot of the transitions in here are a bit harsher. They didn't really hinder my appreciation of it, but I didn't focus on them either. I don't know if you noticed. I didn't really listen as intently as I do normally because I could not help my brain from just disengaging the analytical side and just jamming with it. I loved every moment of listening to this track. So I'm not entirely sure about all of the transitions. Some of them, especially at the beginning when I was still sort of more analytical, were a bit harsher, but they kind of worked. And I don't know if it's because I don't. You know what was interesting though? I'm gonna pull this up real quick, so I think I'm running into a dead end on that one. We had the spoken word at the beginning, right? It was brought back later on, but like looped and overlapped in ways that felt like a repeating memory that was stacking in on itself and kind of getting to the point where it's difficult to remember the details. They all sort of blurred together until it was sort of a vague feeling of the moment rather than an exact memory of it. A compressing down of the memory to better fit into our mental hard drives, figure out what's most important about it and preserve that and ditch the rest. And so, this came after the psychedelic section. The constant overlapping of it was noisy, which was much like what we had heard earlier with the left guitar line. But it was also a bit psychedelic with all the reverb and repeating and overlapping layers going on that fits the more psychedelic section. I don't know if that's particularly what they were going for there, but I do think it's pretty cool that they found a way to distill down the opening event that was the catalyst to all the musical narration that comes after it, and found a way to turn that opening spoken word line into the distillation of the musical experience we've had so far. That's kind of neat. Um, the last thing I want to touch on, I think, before I go is just the entire ending. We had that midpoint there. It felt very story based. We had the emergency sirens. We had water flowing. I said it sounded like a fire hydrant that had been hit. It's just sloshing water everywhere. Um, Apparently, somebody took a big hit, if I remember correctly, what our female voice said. And she invited somebody, or the person, presumably in the accident, maybe, into a room, and this is what kicked off the next song. I'm still going to call it another song. It was a totally divorced from everything else we listened to. I don't care if the track changed or not. That was a new song. It was like a little intermission in, a little moment between tracks, if you will, or a moment between sets, if we continue on with the theater analogies. As far as transitions go, it works on a non-musical level, and I think there's a really interesting thing there that I'm not in the capacity to dig into right now, but non-musical transitions in music. And how does that work? Is it well done? Are there instances where it isn't? I think the concept is interesting. It typically bears well for concept albums where we have characters and an overarching story. But I think we've listened to some tracks that do it without a concept album as well. I just can't think of any. But I think it's an interesting idea to think about music. I mean, it almost feels like they think this is a musical, and as most musicals, there's very rarely are done. Yeah, sorry, very rarely are musicals done without any spoken lines. It makes sense for this one to have spoken lines in it. I'm curious if the rest of the album takes this route as well and utilizes spoken word sections or what feels like even acted scenes to move between ideas, or if this is a one-off. However, I'm seeing that this is track number 2 off of the album, so if they're starting it this way, they're probably going to use it consistently. But it was an interesting idea and a nice way to act as a palate cleanser for something totally different afterwards, which of course was more of a jazzier, sultry, kind of loungy thing going on there. There is that one thing in the outro, though, that stood out to me. A lot of it feels, like I said, loungy. But the drums ended up getting hyper compressed to the point that they almost felt like electronic drums. And it was like 4 bars, maybe tops, and then they quit back out and went back towards the acoustic ones. I don't know what that meant, but it stood out to me as something of interest. Just wanted to point that out because I almost forgot to talk about the outro at all, and I don't know that I have a lot of things to say about it. It's rather surface level and simple compared to the other song that we listened to, the other part of this track. Um, and it's so disconnected from everything else. I don't know. I'm gonna get some lyrics here. I don't really think this was a strong, deep analysis. I think I had a couple pieces of insight, but for the most part, I hope I just kind of showcased some of my love for this and how enthusiastic I was to how enthusiastic I am to dig into more. So yeah, lyrics. All right, so with a little bit of help of the Genius annotations, I can confidently say this is probably, great job. This is probably a concept album. If nothing else, this is a very conceptual, isolated track on an album. We have a character, though, that is called the Fool, which reminds me of the Hunter. This is not listed in the lyrics themselves, but is something that is spoken about several times across all the annotations. They're looking to get into heaven. I don't know if that's literally or metaphorically, but it states, heaven will burn away if you keep calling out its name. You seek a key you cannot forge. I really like that idea. Um, trying to get somewhere, trying to unlock something that you can't do by yourself. So this person says, I've got a cure for you. It's my recipe. It's going to heal your woes. And of course, as we heard from the spoken word part at the beginning, it's the pink lemonade. Not too sweet, not too sour. And our fool says he's brave enough to try some of that. Now we have one vocalist here for two characters. You really have to listen to what's being said and even more interestingly, how it's being said. Vocabulary is specific to characters. Both of the characters here, the lemonade dealer and the fool himself, have very different ways of speaking. And I think that's a really nice detail to help differentiate between them if you're not going to use two vocalists, which I think is interesting because we do have a second vocalist at the end of the track. So it's not like the band is stuck in the mindset that they must use one vocalist for the whole story, for all characters. But they at least decided in this case not to utilize a second, even vocal delivery. The vocalist utilizes the same vocals for both. But anyways, so the fool drinks the lemonade and goes on a trip. And it goes into some stuff that provides some backstory for the character, sort of foreshadows some stuff that I assume we'll learn later in the album, and is just completely mentally destroyed by this pink lemonade. It says they're floating around in a fuchsified dream. Now there's some other stuff in here that seems to, again, foreshadow future revelations. Not necessarily future events, but future revelations about why the fool might be attempting to get into heaven, what it is that makes them feel so low, which is a phrase that comes up a lot in this track. That our fool is down, feeling low, and can't get back up. This whole concept of being at the bottom, which is a great place to start a story at. It means you got a lot of room to go up. Now, after they feel so low, and assuming that after this trip they're kind of just left somewhere, that's where we get the scripted section, the scene. When we have a character say, wake up, come on, big boy, you don't look so good, let me take care of you. And from there, we go into the jazz club, presumably, and she says, I can take care of you physically. That's what the whole ending of that track is all about. And that's where it ends. Moving on, assuming, into the next song there. Yeah, I mean, a lot of this lines up with the music of it. Like I mentioned, there's a lot of emphasis on how the emotions are played out, and I'm sure that if I listen to the music with the lyrics pulled up, I bet there's a lot of synergy between what is being said and what is being played, as they seem to be very interlinked. But yeah, it feels like a story, and being the second track off the album, more particular, the first real track, track one is like a 1 minute intro, it feels like it's setting everything up. We've introduced our main character, presumably the fool. We've kind of laid down a couple of moments that are going to create interest and intrigue in the listener. We've foreshadowed some events that are going to come up, and it's just really setting the stage, I think, for everything. Those are my thoughts on Closure in Moscow's Pink Lemonade. What did you think? Let me know your comments, perspectives, and opinions down in the comments section. If you have anything you'd like to add on to what I said, or correct me on, or give me a little nudge and a wink towards, you don't want to spoil anything. It is a concept album, but maybe there's some things that you think I was very close on catching or completely missed that maybe I should know before I get into the album. Above the comment section in the description box is a link to Linktree. That'll take you to this menu here. You can find links to my music, ways to support the channel, and a link to the Discord server, as well as a bunch of other stuff. Go ahead and check it out. Above that, if you could, like, subscribe, and ring the bell. I greatly appreciate all three of those. Alright, that wraps it up for today. I'll be back tomorrow, 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 9 p.m. UTC. As usual, we're going to check out a full album. Until next time, though, remember to be critical, not cynical, of the music you listen to, and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening whenever you choose to watch my videos.